Our opening words today are from the Commission on Common Worship. From the fragmented world of our everyday lives, we gather together in search of wholeness. By many cares and preoccupations, by diverse and sometimes selfish aims, are we separated from one another and divided within ourselves. Yet we know that no branch is utterly severed from the tree of life that sustains us all.
I will make this very quick. We do intend this to be a series and hit all of our 7 principles, and this is in the context of a wider UUA review of the 7 principles over the next, a few years. Our intention with these programs is to invite members of the congregation to reflect on the principles and how they may have impacted their lives. We are hoping in future that someone or someones will step forward to offer some reflections. We have people prepared to participate in the discussion, and I'm going to turn it right back over to Molly for the introductory remarks, and then hope that you'll keep an eye out for the next one in this series and think about your ability to offer some thoughts.
And today we're going to be focusing on the 6th principle. And we're going to have Karen, our lovely minister, read to us a portion. It's from the 7 Principles in Word and Worship, a book that many of us have kind of used and reflected and worked with. And then after that, we will have some discussion questions and time for everyone to get involved. So, Karen?
So don't worry, you haven't missed the first 5 in the series. The program team, really, I would say, probably inspired by Indigenous traditions, is beginning to see our principles as a circle rather than a list. So the team decided to start with the world, and as you may know or soon learn, our 6th principle is about the lofty hope for peace. So we're starting at the beginning, number 6. This is an essay by Sean Parker Dennison. The 6th principle seems extravagant in its hopefulness and unprobable in its prospects. So much has happened since the principles were adopted in 1981 and revised in 1985. Can we continue to say we want world community, peace, liberty, and justice for all? The world is full of genocide, abuse, terror, and war. What have we gotten ourselves into? As naive or impossible as the 6th principle may seem, I'm not willing to give up on it. In the face of our culture's apathy and fear, I want to imagine and help create a powerful vision of peace by peaceful means, liberty by liberatory means, justice by just means. I want us to believe and to live as if we believe that a world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all is possible. There is no guarantee that we will succeed, but I can assure you that we will improve ourselves and improve the world by trying. Working for world community with peace, justice, and liberty for all is a gift to the world, but also to ourselves as we become liberated from the boxes that keep us from being whole. We are all on a journey toward wholeness, as people and as a religious community. When I began my ministry, I was not so optimistic. In fact, I was fearful of social justice work. During my internship year, the topic for our district ministers' retreat was social justice. As the retreat grew near, I realized I was not looking forward to it. During the social hour, a colleague asked if I was as excited about the program as he was. Much to the surprise of both of us, I answered honestly that I was not looking forward to it at all. This led to a long discussion. I recited for him the reasons why I was feeling cynical. As I peeled through the layers of my resistance, I found at the core a sadly simple fear. I'm young, I said. Unlike you, I've never seen a social movement succeed. You stopped the war, You marched for civil rights. You've seen the government change policy and people change the culture. To me, those are only stories, and most of those stories end in defeat. I wonder why bother? To his credit, my colleague was quite patient and listened to all my fears and excuses. Then he looked me right in the eye and said, "Sean, we didn't march because we thought we would succeed. We marched because it was the right thing to do." In that moment, all my pathetic excuses crumpled. I knew what he said was true. The people in the streets were not simply idealistic hippies, as I'd been taught to believe. They weren't simply foolish optimists. No, they were people driven to the streets by conscience and conviction. They had to march because they knew what was right, and they could not stay silent in the face of war, oppression, and injustice. They were living their principles, and they were living our principles. And I was and am called to do the same. I did not know at the time that my colleague was echoing words that have been repeated again and again throughout Unitarian and Universalist history. Olympia Brown, the first woman to be ordained to our ministry in 1863, said, "Every nation must learn that the people of all nations are children of God and must share the wealth of the world. You may say this is impracticable, far away, can never be accomplished, but it is what we are appointed to do. Sometime, somehow, somewhere, we must ever teach this great lesson." The goal of world community with peace, freedom, and justice for all may not be attainable. It may be an uphill battle, an impossible dream. And yet, if we give up without trying, we lose the opportunity to do what we know is right. We lose the chance to put our principles to work to create more peace, more freedom, and more justice in the world. We may forfeit the prospect of some peace because we insist on perfect peace. We may prove what French novelist Gustave Flaubert once said, "Perfection is the enemy of the good," and unwittingly make ourselves enemies of the good, or the good enough as well. To insist on success is to ensure that nothing will change. Luckily, we do not have to create peace, freedom, and justice for all single-handedly. I am not required to do it alone, nor are you. The Unitarian Universalist community knows some things to be true. We are united in our belief that we should be working to make the world a better place. The next challenge is to begin to do something more than talk about it. A vision of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all can help us do that. Justice is the only value that is referred to twice in our Unitarian Universalist principles, appearing in the second principle as well. So, what is justice? Why is it important enough to be in our principles twice? According to Reverend Ricky Hoyt, the calculation of justice is incredibly complex and perhaps not really possible to solve. We begin our lives with such unjust advantages and disadvantages, having nothing to do with what we deserve, that the inequities are impossible to fully rectify justly during our lives. Justice is getting what you deserve and giving to others what they deserve, not in the punitive sense that we often use the phrase, but in a sense that asks us to use our moral imaginations to picture a world where every person is seen, valued, and then given at least the basics of what they deserve. If giving body and form to universal justice really is what is holy, I am glad there is more to be done. Our congregations and our own lives will be made more meaningful and enriched as we work for justice for all people. Our congregations are schools for our spirits, where by learning to welcome all, we learn to live lives of justice. Our congregations are schools for our spirits, where we learn that by serving this vision of justice, we make our own lives holy. They are schools for our spirits, where we face a broken world and know we can help heal it, and we don't have to do it alone.
A portion of this reading has some affirmations. It says that in a 2004 survey, Unitarian Universalist respondents consistently rated several affirmations of mission that are related to this principle as highly important. So the first one is, we challenge ourselves in our world, which we can define in lots of different ways, our community or, capital W world, to look for options other than violence to resolve differences. How do you and how can we promote peaceful means to resolve differences in our home, church, workplace, and community?
It seems like something that is really, especially in this sort of political culture, that there's not a lot of civil dialogue, and that really is where it needs to start, instead of just, railing on Facebook against something, which I know I do. But being able to have civil dialogue with people that disagree with you really makes you see the humanity. I had a conversation with the school nurse at my son's school the other day, and we were having this great conversation, and then in there she said something about her politics, and I was like, wow, but I still like you, So, anyway.
So can anybody else resonate? More civil dialogue? Yeah, that would be a great way to promote peace. I think I saw a hand back there.
Some years ago, the Bismarck School District got into a argument over books, and it was very contentious. And afterwards, it was actually some of the evangelical ministers went to the superintendent and said, this is tearing our town apart. We need to let's form a group and see if we can think of some common values. And of course, everybody had to put their hand up like I did, because we wanted my values to be going. And what I really learned from that, and it went over a few months, and Lowell Jensen was the superintendent, and what I really learned is all of these parents wanted the same thing for their children, but they had different ways of getting to it. And it was really a wonderful experience. We went in there sort of like trying to, cover our own ground. And it was so listening to others that it's hard.
Thank you, Dennis. I think of what's going on today with the sexual harassment in the workplace, and I think that's one of the places where we can be supportive of women and men who are experiencing this, and to say that speaking up is okay. You're not going to destroy your career or somebody else's, and somehow we have to find a way to handle these situations so that we can allow not a violent reaction, but one that solves the problem or moves us forward as a community as well as those individuals. I've been a victim of sexual harassment, and this has been a very hard time. Things that I hadn't thought about in years are now coming forward. And just destroying somebody's career is not the answer, whether it's the men or the women. We have to find another way.
Thank you.
I just have a short comment on conflict, and I have many Republican friends and who are not shy about speaking about their views, and whenever I feel that tightness inside, I always try and focus on what do I love and appreciate about them. And much as Janet said, there are many, many commonalities, just different ways of coming at that. And I've found having very good discourse, listening, okay, what are your thoughts about that? You know, what do you believe about that? And I've had very good conversations, you know, along those lines. So, but the first step for me always is, what do I love and appreciate about that person? And it gets away from the issue, but it gets back, for me anyway, the person and the person and who they are. And so just a short comment on that.
That's beautiful. I think we have time to do one more affirmation with some comments. So the second one that was highly important, we need to challenge ourselves and our world to build bridges of understanding and respect across differences. So that sounds, a lot of your comments probably fit this one too. What building blocks for understanding and respect have you used or experienced?
I think quite simply, the first one is to acknowledge that there's an issue, that there's a problem. I mean, you don't solve it by ignoring the fact that there's an issue or a problem.
Very true, yeah.
I would just add too that you don't have to have the answer either, so that you can bring it up without I mean, you can be open to hear that there's possibilities, but that it's okay to bring it up with no answers to the question.
That's a great point.
I'm just piggybacking on what I heard essentially from a couple other people. One I've been historically very poor at, but I've identified that I'm really poor at it. I'm trying to be different, is when I'm having a conversation, to put myself in check and say, am I judging in any way, shape, or form? Am I putting you in a box over here because of a political view? Am I putting you in a box over here because of your sex? Am I putting you in I'm just trying to be very mindful of not jumping to judgment and keeping that in check in my conversations. So.
Very good.
Hi. One of the best things we can do is lead by example. So if you allow people to say things that are sexist, racist, discriminate based on wealth or perceptions that they have, you have to shut it down. You have to say, I don't tolerate that comment. I don't trust that behavior. That is not how we treat people that we're among. And they will learn that that's not something that's tolerated in this group. Because if you go along with the crowd continues, and it just takes one person to stand up to that, to make it stop, and make people at least pause and think about their words and actions.
I wasn't going to say anything until that last one. I totally understand what you're getting at, but I have found that if you call people out on things they say, it doesn't do any good. They become more entrenched, they become more bitter, they become more angry, and they will push back hard against you. And so I've done it in the past, and it's only caused frustration. And I mean, I can see what you're getting at, but most people don't want to listen, and they're not going to change their mind.
Has anyone had a successful experience maybe that you could speak to?
You know, in response to that question is, I think, given his point that you just made about standing up, it's kind of like when I put my sister into alcohol treatment, and the counselor said, well, she's never going to take another drink again without thinking, am I an alcoholic? And that's the point you at least have to make them aware of, and that's Dennis's point, to acknowledge the issue. You know, I think that's where standing up and saying that is important, even though they may get more entrenched.
It's the sacrifice, because I see both as well, because it isn't true that we know, all of us know, when we speak up, we do risk our careers. I mean, let's be real, I don't have an answer, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't speak up. It's something we need to talk about, because I know even in myself of situations in which having to choose, that, and it's a real choice, because it's our life, it pays the rent, so it is something we need to talk about.
We had a very similar discussion this morning at Quakers, and Adam said that we have a book at this library about restorative justice. So while there are techniques that you can use that have been thought through, more an answer to your first affirmation than the second one.
Great point.
And I'm really grateful that in the conversation we've had, people weren't intimidated by the world, because every small step that we make adds up and builds and contributes to making it a better world.
And that just made me think of the Goethe thing about if everybody swept his own doorstep, the whole world would be clean. And I think through that idea that you don't make, I like that whole overview of that, you don't necessarily do it because you think it's going to change overnight, but you do it because incrementally over time, things do happen. And it's a very white concept, but the whole Reformation thing, it wasn't Martin Luther, he was just the one that got the credit. You look at the forerunners of like Wycliffe and Huss and so many others, and Martin Luther just brought all that, and then a whole movement goes forward, and maybe we're a product of that too. But yeah, I just think we just can't quit just because, because it's daunting.
And the closing words are also by Sean Dennison. A world of perfect peace, freedom, and justice may be an idealistic dream, yet let's not give up on it. Every effort we make to improve ourselves and our communities makes the world a better place, and it makes our lives better too. Every moment of kindness, every wish for wholeness and respect, every time we do what we know is right, makes the world a little more the way we want it to be.